Hey guys, welcome back to the 12th episode of my poker vlog. My name is Huggy, and this session takes place at Texas Card House in North Austin on a Thursday night. We play some 1-2 no limit holdem, and we also do $5 Parliament Omaha double board bomb pots once per orbit and on every dealer change. I bring $400 this session, which is 2 normal buy-ins, $200 each, but I'm actually planning to buy in short for $150 twice with an extra $100 on top to top off if I feel the need. I won't keep you waiting though, so let's take a look at how the session went. We're barely into the session and I pick up pocket aces. This is only the second time I've picked up aces in holdem over the past 3 months. On average, with how many hours I've played, I should have expected to see pocket aces closer to 10 times, so I'm glad that I'm finally starting to see aces after not seeing it all this time. I haven't seen a pot go unraised at this table, so I decide to limp first to act with the intention of 3-betting a raise. Just our luck, it folds to the button, who calls behind, the small blind completes, and the big blind checks, so we've got 4 players to the flop in a tiny $8 pot. The flop comes Queen 3-8 with 2 hearts. The blinds check to me, and I throw out a bet of $10. Everyone folds, and we win all $8. Ship it, baby!
It's been something stupid.
About 10 minutes later, we pick up pocket 10s, and I'm sitting in the cutoff. There's one limper to me, and I raise to $10. The big blind calls, and the limper 3-bets to $60. He's got me covered, and I'm sitting with about $150 in my stack, so I really need to push all in or fold here. I'm not quite ready to get my chips in this early with just a pair of 10s, so I decide to let it go. After the next hand, the player makes a comment that makes it sound like he had ace-king, and it would have been a flip if we got it all in here. A few hands later, I've got the exact same hand, same card, same suit, pocket 10s again, and I'm sitting in the big blind. An early position player raises to $15. There's one caller, and I decide I'm going to go with the 10s this time. I shove over the top for 107 total. The initial raiser thinks for a bit and ends up making the call. Unfortunately, we see that he's got pocket jacks, and we're drawing to 2 outs.
All right.
I folded the 10s to him a minute ago and then got it again.
Our hand doesn't improve, so I rebuy for another $150, and we're in for 300 total now. A few hands later, I pick up Queen 10 offsuit sitting in the small blind. 4 players limp in, I complete, and the big blind checks. The flop comes 8-3-10 rainbow, so I flop top pair with a decent kicker, and I lead for $10. 3 players make the call, so we've got 4 of us headed to the turn. The turn brings the 4 of clubs. I take one more stab at the pot, making it 30. Only one player calls, so we're heads up to the river. The river brings the jack of clubs. Given the resistance, the coordinated board, and the overcard to my pair, I decide to check here. My opponent quickly bets $45. It's hard to imagine I'm ahead here given the action, so I reluctantly fold my hand. Thankfully, my opponent is nice enough to show that he has ace-8 suited in clubs, meaning he hit the backdoor nut flush and my laydown was good. It also means I only put money into the pot while ahead, which is a nice consolation prize if nothing else. 20 minutes later, I'm dealt ace-jack offsuit and I'm second to act. I open for $12. The player to my left calls and everyone else folds. The flop comes ace-2-7 with 2 hearts. We hit our ace on the flop, and I decide to play this one a bit passively. Given how I've seen my opponent play, if I check to him, I'm expecting him to bet behind with an ace or check without one. With that, I check, and my opponent bets out for $15. I make the call, and I'm inclined to believe my opponent has a worse ace at this point. The turn brings the 9 of diamonds. I check to my opponent again, and now he bets out for $30. I've underrepresented my hand so far, so I call here since effectively nothing has changed with this turn card. The river brings the Queen of Hearts, completing the flush. I check for a 3rd time, and my opponent ends up checking behind. I show my hand thinking it's probably best, but he flips over ace-2 suited. My belief that he had a worse ace in his hand was correct, but it turns out he flopped top and bottom pair, meaning that unfortunately he was ahead on all streets after the flop. I would have continued calling him down on this river, but he slowed down and checked because he was worried about the Queen of Hearts completing the flush, so thankfully we saved a little money with this scare card. This next hand is a PLO double board bomb pot. Everyone pays $5, and we all head straight to the flop with whatever hands were dealt. I've got 7-6-6-4 with clubs. There's 9 players to the flop, and I'm sitting in the small blind. I'm down to my last $95 for the day. The flop comes 3-5-4 with 2 hearts on top, and 7-4-10 rainbow on bottom. I flop the nuts with a straight on the top board and bottom 2 pair on the bottom board. I'm torn between betting and checking here. I've got the nuts, but straights are typically not that strong in PLO when there's 2 more cards to come, since the board pairing or another heart hitting would complete better draws. I don't want to bloat the pot and commit myself this early, so I opt to check here, and it checks around. The turn brings the 10 of clubs on top and the 5 of clubs on bottom. I've still got the nuts on top, and I pick up a straight draw on the bottom as well now. I'm ready to put some money in, so I bet pot for $45. 2 players make the call, and another goes all in for $55 total, so $10 more. I call, and the other 2 players call as well, so we've got 4 players to the river. On the river, we see the queen of diamonds on top and the 6 of diamonds on bottom. My straight has held up on the top board, and I end up hitting a set on bottom, though there are 4 to a straight on the board now. I push all in for my last $45. Both players make the call, and we're headed to showdown. My opponents show King 9-3-3 with hearts, so he missed the flush draw on top with nothing on bottom. Ace 6-5-2, he missed the straight draw on top and has 2 pair on bottom. And 8-8-2-2, just a pair of 8s. He thought he had a straight on bottom, not realizing that he has to play 2 cards from his hand. It turns out we've got the best hand on both boards, and we're scooping this $400 pot. We needed this quadruple up. We're back to even for the day.
Bad night of holdem gun good.
I know. Down so much. Turned out much better than I expected. Thank you.
Is this mine as well?
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
30 minutes later, and I've got pocket 10s for the 3rd time this session. Fortunately, the suits are different this time, so maybe we'll have a little bit of luck. I'm sitting under the gun +2. The first player to act straddles for $5. The player after him calls, and I raise to 25. 3 players make the call, so we're headed 4-way to the flop. The flop comes 8-4-7 with 2 hearts, so I've got an overpair. The small blind leads for $50. Alarm bells are going off in my head because I've seen this player make the exact same play before, leading into the pre-flop raiser when he's flopped top pair. With him leading into me here, I'm thinking my pair of 10s are probably good against his range, and with that, I decide to isolate with a raise. I make it 150 total, and it folds back to the better. He deliberates for a good 30 seconds before deciding to go ahead and push all in. He's got me covered, and I call with my remaining $306. The turn and river bring the king of clubs and the 3 of hearts. I announce my hand, and after a moment, my opponent thankfully mucks. 3rd time's the charm with pocket 10s as we scoop a massive $714 pot.
Radio. What the hell is there something wrong with this?
Thank you.
That's the song.
Is that a foreign language?
I didn't like that heart.
I'm like, oh shit.
I was kind of committed at that point. Yeah, thanks.
I'm now in the next generation.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Alright, get ready. This is my favorite hand from the session. I've got King 10 offsuit, and I'm sitting on the button. We see 2 limpers into the pot, and I raised to $15 since I've got position on the hand. The small blind and the cutoff make the call, and we've got 3 players to the flop. The flop comes 7-10-6 rainbow, so we've got top pair, and when both players check to me, a continuation bet for $30. The small blind folds, and the cutoff calls, so we're heads up to the turn. On the turn, we see the 9 of spades. My opponent checks to me again. This is a scary turn card since there's now 4 to the straight on the board. I consider checking, but I'd rather make a bet to see how my opponent reacts, so I make a smallish bet of $35. He ends up making a min raise to 70. I've seen him make min raises in previous hands with weak pairs and draws, so I'm reluctant to assume he has the straight here. I decide to call his small raise and reassess on the river. The river brings the 8 of diamonds. There's now a straight on the board. As soon as my opponent checks to me, I'm sure he either had the straight or 2 pair on the turn and got counterfeited by the board. Given his check, I don't expect him to have a jack here for a higher straight, and I immediately push all in for about $400 effective. My opponent folds, and I show that I was playing the board. He gives me a fist bump for the play, and we scoop a nearly $250 pot that otherwise would have been a chop.
Thank you.
We've got another PLO double board bomb pot, and I've got King 9-8-3 all diamonds. There's 9 players to the flop, and I'm sitting in the cutoff. The flop comes 3 King 8 with 2 clubs on top, and Jack 10-5 with 2 clubs on bottom. So we've got 3 pair on the top board. Any card pairing the board would give us a boat. On the bottom, we've just got a gut shot. It checks all the way around to me, so I put out a $25 bet. 3 players make the call, and we're headed to the turn. The turn brings the 6 of diamonds on top and the 5 of clubs on bottom. We don't fill up on top, unfortunately, nor do we improve on the bottom board. It checks to the player before me, who pushes all in for $105. After some thinking, I make the call here. Looking back though, I think this would have been an okay spot to fold with my hand not improving. I'm not really getting good odds to hit a boat on top, and it's unlikely that a straight will win on bottom now. Even if my hand on top is good, there are probably a lot of cards that I have to avoid, and I won't know for sure if my hand's good there. The next player folds, and the last player to act deliberates for quite a while, looking like he's on the verge of folding, but ends up making the call. On the river, we see the ace of diamonds and the 7 of clubs. I don't like the ace on the top board since there are certainly some ace-x hands that could easily have made a better 2 pair here. I pick up the straight on bottom though, so I'm hoping that I have the best hand on one of these boards. My opponent, who was reluctant to call the turn, checks to me, and I decide to make a really thin value bet here since I think I likely have him beat on one of these boards, if not both. I put out $100 and my opponent shoves all in. He's got me covered and we're both very deep, and this is suddenly a really gross spot. My biggest concern is that if he has something like ace-king with the ace of clubs, he would have picked up a better 2-pair on top as well as hitting the flush on bottom. Given that, I decide I can't call and I throw my cards into the muck. My opponent shows he's got 9-8 suited in clubs for the rivered straight flush on bottom. His reluctance to call on the turn makes sense since he only had a middle flush on a paired board at that point. When he saw that I bet on the turn behind him, he trapped me with a check on the river when he hit his 2-outer to the straight flush. On the top board, all he has is the pair of 8s. The all-in player shows 10-7-5-2 for a boat on bottom that lost to the straight flush. On the top board, all he has is 10 high. Both players were playing for the bottom board, but unfortunately I couldn't call my opponent's shove given the way things played out. I've thought a bit about my river bet here since this hand. I think if the hand were heads up, my thin river bet is okay. I don't completely hate it. Given this exact scenario, it didn't turn out well since my opponent hit a 2-outer to the straight flush, but my read on the scenario was correct prior to that card giving him a position to be able to shove over the top of me. Since this hand wasn't heads up though, I was actually betting into a dry side pot. This doesn't really accomplish anything since I don't gain to win anything extra unless I can get a hand like a middling flush to fold, giving me a better hand on bottom. I don't think a $100 bet here is going to accomplish that, so ultimately I don't think this play made sense given the circumstances. Lesson learned. The very next hand I'm dealt ace-queen offsuit, and I'm sitting in the cutoff. There's 3 limpers into the pot, I raise to 15, and 3 players make the call. The flop comes queen 2-king with 3 hearts. I flop second pair on a very wet board. Still, when it checks to me, a continuation bet for $20. I don't want hands with a single low heart to get a free turn. We get 2 folds, so we're heads up to the turn now. The turn brings the 5 of diamonds. My opponent checks to me, and even though there's a king on the board, I think there's still a good enough chance that I have the best hand here, and that my opponent could be on a draw, so I bet again for $30. My opponent folds, and we scoop the pot. 30 minutes later, we're playing the last hand of the day, and it's ace-queen offsuit again. We're sitting in the hijack. We see several limpers into the pot, and I raise to $12. The player behind me calls, 2 other players call, and we've got 3 to the flop. The flop comes ace-4-4 with 2 clubs. It checks to me, and I probably should have bet here. At the time, I was thinking I've got such a strong hand here that a continuation bet will just get everyone to fold, and I'll pick up a small pot. I was hoping to let at least one player catch up a little, but I think this is flawed thinking. However, I do go with a check, and the player behind me leads for $20. One other player calls, and I call as well. The turn brings the queen of spades. I've got top 2 pair now, so I'm really only worried about a 4 if there happens to be one out there. This time when it checks to me, I lead for $50. The player behind me, who led on the flop, goes all in for 91 total. The third player thinks for almost a whole minute before deciding to make the call. Given the action, I'm more inclined to believe that if anyone is ahead of me with a 4, it's the all-in player, not the reluctant caller. Just calling here will probably result in a loss to the all-in player if that's true, and given that the remaining opponent and I have much deeper stacks at this point, I decide to go with it here and push all in. My opponent doesn't look happy, but reluctantly makes the call for about $300 more. We've got a huge, almost $1,000 pot brewing. On the river, we see the 8 of hearts. I show my top 2 pair, and the opponent who called my all-in mucks his hand. We scoop a massive side pot for $600. The shorter stacked all-in player shows 10-4 suited for flop trips, so we don't pick up the $381 main pot, unfortunately. Overall, though, we net nearly $200 more in chips from this hand, and I'm happy to take the win.
Thank you.
So this was a pretty good session overall. We bought in for $400 and cashed out for $751. So in all, it was a $351 win. I played for 4.25 hours at $12 an hour, so that comes out to $51 in expenses. I also left a $2 tip, and so that gives us a total net profit of $298. Not bad for a little over 4 hours. If you like the video, please hit the like and subscribe button. I'm trying to release these every week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care.